learn a lot about muscle pathways, how you shouldn't always have your insulin skyrocketed, which is kind of obvious. But
What do you mean by that?
so these days we love sugar, we love processed food. You spike your glucose, this spikes your insulin, especially if you're not moving after a meal, if you're not eating protein or fat with a meal, if you're just eating straight carbs and you're just sitting on a couch after, like your insulin spikes, and then this insulin spike leads to chronic inflammation, leads to insulin resistance, and then that's basically diabetes
That was one
in the
that I
chronic state.
struggled with habitually was moving after meal. Is that why you put that in there? And is that something that you recommend people do more? Like, I don't necessarily do that really ever,
Yeah.
like move after I eat. Like, that's not usually I
It's
eat and then
time to
I sit for a
sit
little
back
bit.
and take a
And
nap.
then once I get up, I usually just like do the dishes. You know what I mean? Like, I don't tend to like, I just ate. Now I'm going to go move. Although I think that would probably make me feel better. I feel like that would probably help the digestion process and
Mhm.
seems like other things, but I don't know if you want to speak to that. I feel like that's really good advice that I didn't apply very well in the challenge.
Yeah. I mean, it's postprandial exercise is what they term it. There's a
Post,
lot of studies on it.
post what?
Postprandial, so after eating, it's just what they term it. There's a lot of studies that have been done on it. Reduces the insulin spike because exercise, when you exercise, and I would say just like walking, you don't want to do like high intensity exercise right after you
I was
eat.
going
You
to say,
obviously because you're
I ate some nachos one
yeah
day and ran like 2 hours later, and it was miserable. Never
yeah.
do
So
that. Such a bad
so
idea.
that that is not what you want to do. So this is basically just like a post meal walk. I'm talking like post meal walk. They've found
I checked Facebook, see was that work.
It's part of
Like
the challenge, but I think I'm gonna
1.2
puke.
miles. You want to throw it on?
so they've seen like the sooner after a meal the better, just like a walk, because when you do move, your basically your muscles are better able to uptake that glycogen that or glucose that you're eating. So your insulin doesn't have to spike as high to store that glucose. So your muscles are absorbing it instead of like insulin being secreted and storing that. So it reduces the insulin spike, which reduces inflammation, which reduces your like total lipid levels, and it's just a chain effect. So they've seen a lot of benefit from just like a walk after a meal, whether that's 10 minutes or 15 minutes. I think the closer the better, but eating like protein and fats with your meal also is beneficial in lowering the glucose spike, which lowers the insulin spike. We're not as worried about the glucose spike, it's the insulin spike that we are worried about. And you see there's studies like showing like somebody that's trained versus somebody that's not. Like you give them the same glucose drink, the person that's not trained is going to have a higher insulin spike, even though their glucose spike is going to be the same. So it's really just moving after a meal to let your muscles absorb the glucose better. That's what exercise in general does that is beneficial for insulin spikes.
Maybe dig into this a little more because I think this is important and I don't really understand insulin very well. What's the negative? And I could just ask Paige, but I'm sure other people maybe are curious too. Like, what's the negative impact to insulin spiking? Like, why is that bad?
So
What does that cause? I guess you might have answered it, but
yeah, so
like,
say we eat a meal with a good amount of carbohydrates. So that's like sugar, starch, whatever. You eat that, it's digesting in your stomach. In response to that meal, your body's going to secrete insulin out of your pancreas. So this is going to get that glucose to want to be stored. And you can store this glucose in your muscle and your liver, or you can store it as fat. So about 100 grams will store in your liver, about 350 grams will store in your muscle, and then whatever's left is going to be stored as fat. So if we can knock that insulin secretion down, less of that glucose is going to be stored as fat, and more of it's going to be stored like in our liver, in our muscle, or it's going to be like utilized by our brain in our blood. So what diabetes is you're chronically secreting that insulin, but your body's not responding to it. So you're not utilizing that glucose, and it's just continually being stored as fat. So you're just continually storing this glucose as fat, and you're not using it. So that's why they call it insulin resistant. So like your body just eventually becomes resistant to that insulin, and you're just going to keep storing carbs as fat, and it's just not good.
Instead of in your
So
muscles or
that's
liver.
why, yeah. And that's type 2 diabetes. Type 1, you don't even produce insulin, so you have to inject insulin.
Yeah, that's
And
more of a youth.
that's more of like the genetic one.
Yeah.
Type 2, it used to be called adult onset, but now you're seeing it in kids. So
That's interesting. That's
it's just
fascinating.
like, yeah, it's getting worse and worse because we're getting more and more processed and just eating junk. So
Can people
it's
that
a vicious
have
cycle.
have like fat usage like afford to like fast? Like, you know what I mean? Like, or have bouts of fasting because they have enough energy stored up, or is that negative advice? Like, I'm just curious.
So I do fast every so often, but I think it's hard for me to prescribe it to people. Like I don't want to tell people to fast unless like I can monitor them,
Yeah.
because it's hard for me to trust that they're going to do everything right and listen to their body and not like have, because if they are in like a state of hyperglycemia or hypoglycemia, like if you get hypoglycemic, there's a chance you can like pass out. Like,
Yeah.
have you ever seen Paul Blart Mall
Yeah.
Cop?
Yeah.
Like he's got diabetes, and if his blood sugar gets low, like he's legit gonna pass out because his blood sugar's too low.
Because you've
So
been so reliant on it for so long, probably.
yeah, because his blood sugar's high all the time. So when it gets low, it's not good, because like our brain uses that as fuel. Like we're using
Yeah.
glucose as fuel. So
And eventually you need to
if we run out of
train
fuel,
it to use a different source. Like if eventually you want to change the source of energy like that it
I
uses,
wouldn't
or not,
say so.
not really. Like, cause that's like the whole like keto
Yeah,
thing, which I guess that's my question. I don't know. Like, I know that was a fad for a long time, but I'm sure people have
I
tried
know.
it, and I don't know. It's still probably a thing around. I don't know.
I think it's easier just to eat the right amount of carbohydrates, and like your brain wants to use carbs. It likes ketones too, but I don't know. I would rather just eat the right amount of carbs. And
I think it's more so just like prioritizing before and after working out, and then try to limit it the rest of the day. Like I think that's a simple
Yeah,
but
like using
practical
it
way to
for
think
the,
about it.
yeah, using it
Like
for
going,
the workout,
yeah,
using it to recover for the workout, and then you're pretty much have what you need like
yeah,
the rest of the
kind of
day.
like
You're not
that's kind
actually going to spend that much energy type of a thing, or like
yeah.
physically, really, other than like your brain and some recovery stuff. But
that's probably the biggest thing I've learned from his class is he's so like every answer is like in moderation. Like you
yeah,
obviously don't want
yeah,
to have your insulin chronically spiked. You obviously like even like muscle hypertrophy pathways, like you don't want to have that chronically spiked, because like there's a reason that we aren't building muscle all the time. Like we need to like allow our body to get rid of bad protein and get rid of bad cells, and like go through autophagy and just like clean out our system. So like we shouldn't be growing muscle all the time. We shouldn't be releasing insulin all the time. Like do things in moderation, like work out,
But the
eat
gains, dude.
protein and carbs after, and then don't eat until a couple hours later. Like don't be chronically stimulating your body to digest all the time, because it's a vicious cycle. So
mm,
yeah, I mean, if I had to recommend, I would eat a good breakfast, high in protein, go for a sunrise walk after, let it digest well, eat a decent lunch, also with protein, go for a walk after, and then I like to work out in the afternoon, so I would work out and then eat supper after, just because our bodies are like least efficient at digesting carbohydrates in the evening. Like we're better in the morning. So after a workout, we're better at utilizing it because, like I said earlier, if you work out, your body's better at uptaking that glucose into our muscles. So it's just a way of like allowing your body to digest carbs better in the evening. So I would work out in the afternoon and then have supper after, a couple hours before bed, and then you're good.
Repeat.
Like put it on the repeat. Have foods that you love to eat, can eat all the time, don't get sick of, or just mix it up, have a couple. You're good, man. That's all it takes.
Easy game.
Have a snack every once in a while, eat a pizza every once in a while.
Don't need
That's life,
don't
man.
need the nachos and run.
Yeah.
Don't do
Let your
it.
body
I'm
digest
just
for a
picturing like
couple
eat a bunch of
hours.
nachos and then instantly like 100 burpees. Like, oh, I got to burn this up. Don't do it that way.
Don't do it.
No.